Hello, everyone. My name is Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News, and today I'm here with Representative David Schweikert of Arizona. Once again, Congressman, thanks so much for joining me.
And as long as you call me David.
Congratulations on your reelection to the House, and I will call you
Yeah.
Representative Schweikert, of course. It's now been over 2 weeks since Election Day. So, what were your takeaways from the election results on both the national and state level in Arizona? What did
Oh,
Republicans do right, especially since, President-elect Trump was able to win back the state? What do you think Democrats did wrong or vice versa?
um, terrific question. And I think the postmortem still is not completed yet. But Americans actually do care about their prosperity. They do care about their economic future. And some of the early sort of data, and we see this from some of the polling, is the arrogance I thought the left engaged in was believing just pounding away on a couple social issues would override people's economic stress, inflation stress, pricing stress, and just sort of a quasi, um, trying to find an elegant way to say the not thinking about people and their needs instead of sort of telling them that this should be your cultural view instead of, hey, I'm just trying to economically survive.
Mhm. And that's something that you believe President-elect Trump and Republicans were able to communicate well
Uh,
with the American public.
Oddly enough, I go a little bit. I think in some ways the Democrats may have done as much damage to themselves in their own messaging as those of us on, the more conservative or the Republican side. We sort of stayed sort of consistent on a message, and I was continuing to be shocked because we would see in our polling, people are having even people in a district like mine, which is well educated, somewhat more prosperous, were stressed out of their minds just trying to pay for things. And the unwillingness to talk to people about those stresses seemed very odd from the Democrats.
Mhm. And so, a Democrat that did have some success in your state, though, is the new Senator-elect Ruben Grijalva, who I believe you've served with for several years. So, what's your relationship like with the incoming senator? And is there anywhere you might agree with him policy-wise and maybe hope to work with him for the people of
Well,
Arizona?
and in that race is going to have its own sort of post-mortem because uh, is that a race where he won or a Republican candidate wasn't able to sort of repair her relationships with conservative and more traditional conservative voters. So I think that one may have been less about the environment and more about some of the personalities and perceptions of those personalities.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that was a trend that you saw across the um, country? I think there were a few
No,
races that, okay, that,
I really don't. I think this one had sort of a unique ethos
mhm.
to the previous 2 years.
Yeah. But going back to my question, any thoughts on your new senator elect who used to be your colleague in the House?
Um, because he never really worked on sort of the economic issues, like look, when you become a member of Congress, you sort of get moved into a specialty. My specialty is always taxes, Medicare, financing, economics. Um, Others, go on to defense issues or judicial issues. So you actually have colleagues who you see in the hallway, and that's the only time you ever talk to them because you don't hold any of the same committees.
Mhm. Well, I do want to talk about the issues that you mentioned that are very important to you. So, what are you most excited to see get done under the new administration and the next Congress, especially with the Republican trifecta that you now have?
Um, Brilliant question and a tougher answer. Um, my great hope is there actually becomes some acceptance of math. Uh, Look, we're burning $71,000 a second. That's our borrow rate. And that's actually supposed to go up fairly substantially over the next decade. Um, and all of that is actually driven by our demographics. Now, we're not supposed to tell people that because it makes them cranky. But the fact of the matter is, every dime of borrowing, think of this from now to the next decade, is interest and substantially healthcare, almost all Medicare. And then at the end of that decade, we have to backfill Social Security. Can we as Republicans, now that we have the trifecta, deal with the issue of the expiring tax provisions that happened at the end of 2025? And those are individual taxes, pass-throughs, your S corporation, your LLC, and find a way to not let the average family in my district's taxes go up almost $3,000. At the same time, find ways through modernization, cuts, improvements in the tax code, improvements in some trade. You have dozens of things you have to do to find a way to also pay for those. And there becomes our great difficulty. There's a lot of really difficult math that's going to hit us January.
Yeah, I feel like math is definitely a theme that we keep coming back to in our interviews. I know that President-elect Trump has announced a new Department of Government Efficiency that will be headed by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I saw a little bit of your tweets about it. So what do you hope they accomplish? And do you think that you'd be willing to work with them in enacting legislation that you've already introduced?
It's one of my greatest hopes. We run part of our office almost like a think tank, where we come up with ideas, we work with our joint economic economists, vet the idea, and can we find a way to do policy? We write the legislation. But because these are often disruptive ideas, there's no audience for it. And in the current administration, the Biden administration, we could never get an audience there. The current Senate, held by the Democrats, we could never get an audience there. And then for a lot of our Republican colleagues, they didn't feel that there was a path. So when you come to them and say, look, let's go to one that's sort of radioactive, but it's actually mathematically honest. We did an economic study with the Joint Economic Economists several months ago that obesity in America over the next 10 years will add 9.1 trillion additional healthcare costs, making it as an individual line item the single most expensive thing in the U.S., in U.S. government. The morality of helping people be healthier turns out to be incredibly good economics and incredibly good budgetary in lowering the borrowing and spending of the government. How do you work with Elon Musk and the team that the president's putting together, or incoming president's putting together, and say, we've already done much of the legislative work, the research work, the tax modeling, the savings modeling. Now help us push it through Congress, because the ideas are out there, but you got to have someone with the name brand of a Musk or someone like that to get the political culture to, let's be honest, sometimes have to bypass the lobbyists who do not want their business model changed.
Someone who I think also has that same level of recognition that could be joining the administration is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I think going back to what you're talking about with obesity, I'm sure that's also something that he would probably agree with you on, of getting to that root cause, not only for the health of Americans, but economically. So maybe that's also something that he would get involved with.
Now let's have the moment of brutal honesty. The efficiency that you and I find that's moral, that's good for America, good for the economics, good for prosperity, that efficiency is a disruption to someone else's way they make money. And there becomes, you have to be willing. So we've had things where, hey, there's the technological breakthrough where you don't have to duplicate MRI scans, or a way to prevent sepsis in the hospital, those things. They're moral, it's the right thing to do, it saves money. You would be shocked. You often find out by doing that, you just disrupted the cash flow of certain incumbent businesses. It's why we had such battles over telehealth and digital health, because when someone can pick up, their phone and take care of their health needs, they don't walk into the urgent care center or the emergency room. So on one hand, you've improved quality of health and hopefully designed it where you reduce costs, but now you just disrupted someone else's business model.
I want to go back to something that you had also mentioned in your one of your previous answers about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that might
Mhm.
expire at the end of next year. So, you mentioned the benefits, and how it will actually, how you believe it will cut taxes for your constituents. But I hear Democrats who say this is just Donald Trump's tax proposals that are going to be tax breaks for the ultra wealthy billionaires and big corporations that are going to hurt everyday Americans. So, what's
Yeah.
your response to that argument?
Well, look, most of those people that do the Pinocchio stuff have long since been exhausted of some of the Democrats' talking points. First off, we need to put this in context. 2017, we did tax reform. It wasn't tax cuts. Because remember, there was like 4,000 or 4 trillion, 5 trillion in tax hikes and like 6.5 trillion of tax cuts. And it was designed to make us competitive in the world again. Our tax code was 30 some years out of date. That's why so many businesses were leaving the United States. We wanted them to repatriate, we wanted them to invest here. And income inequality for those years before the pandemic, from 2017 to that time happened, closed. Wealth grew, but it was wealth for rich people, but also the working poor. It was one of the greatest growths of wages. But part of that bill, so it fit into what they called reconciliation, there's just the budgetary design rules, had an expiration date. Those individual parts of the tax cuts expire at the end of next year. That's what we're talking about. These are not new tax cuts. These are what you pay today. Do your taxes go up, or are we able to continue the rates regime you live under today? The problem is in 2026 budget year, that functionally is $400 billion. It's like 4.6 trillion over 10. So, and those are the rates paid by small businesses, pass-throughs, individuals. How do you say, I want to hold people harmless? I want to keep you where you're at, but I also don't want to add to the debt. And that's why it becomes so difficult. And it saddens me, but and I would think the Democrats would have learned. They've been campaigning on this for years now, and they keep losing. Maybe they should join the cause and fixate on American prosperity with us.
Mhm. Another major economic plan that you hear some pushback from Democrats about is Trump's plan to increase tariffs. So, can you clarify what do you make of Trump's proposal on, I believe, 60 to 100% tariff on goods from China and 10 to 20% on all other imports?
Um, you, this is one I'm slightly befuddled on because the actual implementation of tariffs is much more tricky because the complication of you do excessive tariffs here, do you end up with just the leakage coming through a different country? So I think most folks don't understand the complications coming. But let's do some math together. In the 2024 fiscal year, so it's already passed, I think all imports to the United States equaled $3.2 trillion. If you came to me and said, okay, that's everything, that's things we don't make, that's rare earths, that, everything. If you're going to tariff only part of that book and you say, how much money do you need? You start to realize the scale of the tariffs. And now you have the other side. If you do that, the United States is a major, major agricultural exporter to the rest of the world. Now, do you have all of our exports tariffed? So it actually has to be done very carefully, or you need to think through other models. Let's geek out for just a second. When another country sells us a product, almost every other industrialized country operates under what they call a value-added tax. As soon as that product's exported, they give them that exporter back the 18.5 or 19%. When it hits our shore, we may put a little tax on it, but when we send something to their country, it already has all the US taxes, and then they load their VAT tax on top of it. So the entire world has a VAT arbitrage on us. So for many of our products, one of the price efficiencies exporters have to the United States is not that they do it better, faster, cheaper. Not that their labor is more efficient, it's actually a tax arbitrage. Maybe we need to go back to the research we did several years ago of instead of just a blunt tariff, are there things we could do to take away the rest of the world arbitrage, the way they function, they screw with us by using their refunded VAT to get a competitive advantage over American exporters and adjust their price as they export to us. So there's more to it. If you really want to fix the problem of the competitive advantage, you need to understand those input prices.
As you've described there, it is a very complicated topic. And do you think that President-elect Trump and his team, especially his picks when it comes to addressing these issues, are going to be able to listen to you and your
Yeah.
colleagues on these issues and be able to understand that it is more complex instead of, not addressing the complexities of the issue?
The first Trump administration had some very smart people in regards to trade, and they were tough. And I think they were also supportive that we may need a much more universal solution than just, another major economy that we believe cheats, but also deal with the fact the rest of the world uses that tax arbitrage on us that puts our manufacturers at a competitive disadvantage.
So I do want to also talk about some news of the day. What is the latest update on the federal budget negotiations? Will Congress be able to avoid a government shutdown, or will we
Yeah.
be getting a stopgap bill rather than reaching a full year of funding?
Um, my guess is we'll end up coming back in early December and doing a continuing resolution, punting it into the new presidency, because that might give us an opportunity to actually get rid of some of the legacy things that are in the budget that we think are quite disharmonious to economic growth.
Like what, for example?
There's certain subsidies in there that date all the way back to COVID that are still being rolled in as subsidies, and they should have expired a couple of years ago. So that, I mean, there's examples like that woven through the budget. The hard part for most people to understand is every dime that a member of Congress actually votes on. So all the defense and all the non-defense discretionary, that's what we vote on, is on borrowed money today. Um, the mandatory, the Social Securities, the Medicares, the veterans benefits, those are on autopilot. So when 75% or so of the US budget is functionally mandatory, it's a formula. The 25 or so percent we get to vote on, yet for every dollar the United States takes in tax receipts, we spend $1.39. So $1 in, $1.39 out. So when you start having people say, well, if you just cut that, you'd be fine. We did a math experiment on a floor speech the other day, which once again, I really appreciate Forbes Breaking News for taking my floor speeches and putting them up on your YouTube
Of course,
channel.
our audience loves to tune into those.
Yeah, I can't believe how many people are willing to look at some idiot walking through the economics. But we were trying to make a point. If you fired every non-uniformed, so civil service employee in all the federal government, all of them, the budget for that last year was $213 billion. We're going to borrow maybe 2.3 trillion this year. Getting rid of every non-uniformed employee in the federal government only takes care of 10% of the borrowing. And the only reason I say things like this is I'm trying to help people understand the scale is enormous and it's structural. It's the benefits that people have earned, but over the last half century, Congress never set aside the money for something called the baby boom population, this large demographic bubble that moved into those benefits.
Well, speaking of your House floor speeches, I noticed that you posted a photo on Twitter from one of them where, as we were talking about before about DOGE, and you posted a photo of a screenshot of you. It said Pentagon UnAuditable from one of those great House
Oh,
floor
brilliant.
speeches. So I just wanted you to explain to us, they failed the audit
Okay.
again for, I think, the
I
seventh
think
year.
we,
So how's it possible? And do you think we can achieve a clean audit under a Trump administration?
yeah, this has been going on for a while. I think we just had the ninth year in a row where the Pentagon's books are unauditable. So for a few years now, we've been trying to say, let's use AI to crawl through the Pentagon's data and figure out where our assets are, where things have been ordered. Are they in the right shelves? Are they in the right base? Are they, because it's more than just the audit. If you read the notes, we don't even have quality inventory lists. We don't know what the military owns. And we succeeded this last year of getting an AI audit of the Pentagon in what they call the National Defense Authorization Bill. But that bill went to the Senate, nothing happened. The Democrats weren't going to take it up. So we're going to try again. But that's an example of work we've been doing in our office now for years of trying to operate like a disruptive thinking high tech think tank. How do we get that to the Elon Musks of the world and say, look, let's use AI to start to crawl through the asset inventory, spending, receipts, invoice lists through all of government. Let's use technology, not armies of unionized employees. And it's shocking the pushback you get because either people don't understand the technology or they think these things should just be an employment backstop. And we're just trying to save the country.
Well, I appreciate you breaking this all down for me. My last question, what can we expect to see from the Joint Economic Committee, where you're currently the vice chair? Will we potentially see you becoming the chair next Congress?
Yeah, if I don't do something stupid and make the speaker mad, which I'm perfectly capable of doing, I will be the chairman this next cycle. And the Joint Economic Committee, we try actually to just be intellectually robust. It's not about making, forgive my language, making crap up or defending one side over another. We work for getting the math right. It's also one of the only groups in all of Congress that actually does the actual demographics work, what's really happening in America. We were just doing a study of how many years is it before America has more deaths than births. It could be as soon as 11 years from now. And almost no one talks about things like that of how do you build benefits in a society where your population will be flat or getting much older. And then how do you economically score ideas? Because there's some ideas that produce lots of tax receipts, and then other ideas that actually slow the economy down and slow innovation down. And that's part of our job with the Joint Economic Committee and our economists is provide an understanding of the robustness of the data we have and how we can make great policy or we can continue to just do things that lack the intellectual robustness to get America going.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Congressman. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Hey, thank you for having me. I wish you good things.